Imagine losing everything, not just your job, but your reputation, your identity, because of one misunderstood moment. Elaine Wilkins thought she was in control, but one flight, one interaction, and one viral video changed everything. Accused, judged, and abandoned, she had two choices: fight for the truth or let her past define her. But what she uncovered, it was bigger than she ever imagined. This is a story about redemption, forgiveness, and the power of second chances. Stay with us, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Pause. Before we dive in, let us know, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Elaine Wilkins quietly adjusted her uniform, smoothing out imaginary wrinkles as she moved through the airplane cabin. She was an experienced flight attendant, respected by passengers and colleagues alike. But lately, life hadn't been kind to her. Losing her husband recently had left Elaine in a storm of grief, and the looming threat of losing her job only deepened the lines around her tired eyes. Being in her 40s, Elaine could feel younger colleagues silently eyeing her position, waiting to step into her shoes. Tonight's flight from Atlanta to Boston was unusually calm. The gentle hum of the engines seemed comforting, yet Elaine felt anything but comforted. She moved slowly down the aisle, quietly serving coffee and snacks, smiling politely despite her exhaustion. Most passengers were lost in sleep or staring at phones, barely noticing her presence. Then as Elaine leaned forward to hand a cup of coffee to a passenger, a sudden bump of turbulence startled her, sending hot coffee spilling onto the passenger's dark jacket. Elaine looked up, startled, meeting the gentle eyes of an older African-American man, someone she recognized immediately. He was Nathaniel Grant, a local pastor known for his quiet strength and powerful community activism in Atlanta. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry," Elaine mumbled softly, but she found herself backing away without even handing him a napkin. Her mind raced chaotically. Why did she react this way? Why couldn't she just reach out, help him clean his jacket like she normally would have? Returning hastily to her station at the back, Elaine's heart thumped uncomfortably. She glanced around nervously, worried someone might have seen her strange behavior. Thankfully, no one seemed to notice, or so she thought. But deep inside, Elaine knew the truth. She'd felt uneasy around Nathaniel, not just because of the spilled coffee, but because something about him stirred hidden discomfort she couldn't fully understand. It was a feeling buried deep, passed down silently from her father's harsh, secretive past, a shadow of prejudice she never openly confronted. Elaine quickly shook off these troubling thoughts and resumed her duties, forcing a casual smile onto her face. Yet behind her composed facade, something gnawed uncomfortably at her conscience. In the very last row, unnoticed by Elaine, a younger passenger had quietly captured the incident on his phone. He glanced at the video, hesitating for only a moment before uploading it online with a provocative caption. Within minutes, social media had begun to buzz, quietly but swiftly amplifying a controversy Elaine didn't even realize she'd sparked. Back in her seat at the rear of the cabin, Elaine stared absently through the darkened window at distant city lights below. She knew nothing yet about the coming storm, unaware that a small accident had just ignited a flame, powerful enough to alter her life forever. Elaine awoke the next morning feeling more exhausted than ever. She barely slept after landing in Boston, troubled by an unexplainable anxiety that lingered. As she walked into the Aero Atlantic Airlines headquarters for a mandatory staff meeting, Elaine sensed the tense silence hanging over the office. Colleagues whispered and glanced at her before quickly averting their eyes, adding to her growing unease. Dana Whitlock, her younger supervisor, met her near the conference room doorway with a forced smile that hid little hostility. Dana had always resented Elaine's seniority, quietly longing for her prestigious position as lead attendant. Now Elaine saw a chilling satisfaction lurking in Dana's eyes. "Elaine, management wants to see you immediately," Dana said, her voice sugary yet edged with anticipation. Elaine nodded quietly, her heart beginning to pound faster. She stepped into the conference room, sensing trouble. Around the polished conference table sat company executives with unreadable expressions. Laptops open, screens glowing ominously. Elaine took a seat carefully, trying to steady her trembling hands. Elaine, have you seen this video? Richard Evans, her direct manager, asked gently yet sternly, turning his laptop toward her. Elaine watched silently, horror rising within her as the footage played. The video, showing her awkwardly backing away from Pastor Nathaniel Grant, had now accumulated thousands of shares, comments pouring in, accusing her of racial bias. This isn't what it looks like, Elaine began, her voice shaking slightly. It was an accident. I was just exhausted. It doesn't matter, Richard Stern, the HR director, interrupted gently. Perception is reality, Elaine. And right now, public perception is everything. We have no choice but to suspend you immediately pending further investigation, Stern concluded, regret evident but firm. Elaine left the building stunned and humiliated. As she stepped onto the busy streets of Boston, sunlight glaring harshly against the pavement, she felt utterly isolated. Everything she'd worked for her entire life suddenly hung precariously. Standing at a busy street corner, her phone vibrated, breaking her trance. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Elaine hesitated, then picked up the call. Ms. Wilkins, this is Pastor Nathaniel Grant, came the warm, reassuring voice. Elaine froze, uncertain how to respond. I understand what happened yesterday was unintended, but I think you and I should speak. There's something important I need you to know. Surprised by the unexpected gentleness in his voice, Elaine found herself agreeing to meet him later at a small cafe just outside the city. After hanging up, Elaine stood still, watching the busy crowd flow past her, feeling the world move rapidly while she remained stuck in place. Yet deep down, something stirred. It wasn't simply fear or anxiety. Rather, it was the faint glimmer of hope that perhaps Pastor Grant could help her understand this sudden storm overtaking her life. Perhaps this uncomfortable meeting would offer clarity she desperately needed, even if it meant confronting truths she'd avoided all these years. Taking a deep breath, Elaine stepped forward into the crosswalk, feeling both terrified and hopeful, sensing she stood at the edge of something far greater than herself. The morning air felt chilly as Elaine arrived at Aero Atlantic Airlines headquarters. The building, usually bright and welcoming, felt cold and uninviting today. She stepped through the large glass doors, noticing immediately how people avoided eye contact. Her colleagues busied themselves at their desks, pretending not to see her as she passed by. Their whispers drifted softly through the corridor, painful murmurs she couldn't quite make out, but their meaning was clear enough. She took a seat in a quiet corner of the waiting area, staring blankly through the wide windows at the city skyline. Elaine's thoughts wandered, remembering childhood days when she'd admired her father so deeply. She had always believed he was a good man, strong and honest. But now doubts crept in, whispering questions she feared answering. Suddenly, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Pastor Nathaniel Grant stood there, wearing a warm smile that somehow eased Elaine's troubled heart. Elaine, he greeted her gently, I came to speak on your behalf. Elaine looked up in surprise, feeling a sudden lump forming in her throat. Why was this man, someone she'd unintentionally hurt, being so kind to her? Before Elaine could speak, the door opened sharply, and Dana Whitlock appeared. Her smile was professional, but Elaine could see a cold gleam of triumph in her eyes. Elaine, Dana said smoothly, the executives are ready for you. Inside the executive conference room, Elaine faced stern faces around a large polished table. She explained herself calmly, honestly, but every word she spoke seemed to fall flat against the judgment already made in their minds. They informed her of her immediate suspension, a decision made to protect the company's reputation. Elaine walked slowly out of the building, feeling a mixture of despair and humiliation. Outside, Nathaniel stood waiting patiently, his expression calm and reassuring. I believe we still have much to discuss, Nathaniel said softly. Would you meet me later at Riverbend Cafe? It's a quiet place, away from all this noise. Elaine hesitated only briefly, then nodded in quiet acceptance. She knew something significant was about to unfold, yet uncertainty still gripped her heart tightly. The Riverbend Cafe was exactly as Nathaniel had described, peaceful and quaint, set beside a slow-moving stream shaded by old oak trees. Elaine took a seat at a corner table, nervously watching the gentle flow of water. The smell of fresh brewed coffee filled the air, comforting, yet somehow melancholy. Nathaniel arrived shortly after, greeting Elaine with a gentle smile. They exchanged brief pleasantries, the tension palpable beneath the polite conversation. Finally, Nathaniel's expression grew serious. He began speaking quietly, choosing his words carefully. Elaine, I knew your parents many years ago. Did you know that? Elaine shook her head silently, feeling a pang of confusion and apprehension. Your father, Nathaniel continued gently, was once part of something he deeply regretted. He was involved with a group of people driven by prejudice and fear. But your mother, Sylvia, she was brave. She reached out to me secretly, desperately trying to rescue your family from that hatred. Elaine felt her breath catch in her throat, the shock nearly overwhelming her. Tears welled in her eyes as Nathaniel gently revealed how her mother had quietly fought against her father's darker impulses, working tirelessly to break their family free from the cycle of prejudice. Sylvia came to me many times, Elaine, Nathaniel said, his voice tender with memory. She believed in forgiveness. She believed everyone deserved a second chance, even your father. Elaine's eyes filled with tears. All these years she'd blamed her mother for their family struggles, believing she was weak for staying silent. But now she saw clearly. Her mother's silence had been a strength, a quiet courage that saved their family from being consumed by hatred. Nathaniel gently reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand over Elaine's trembling fingers. I never blamed you for your reaction on the plane. I recognized immediately who you were, and that reaction, it came from confusion, not cruelty. I knew your mother's heart, and I see it in you. Elaine sat quietly, absorbing Nathaniel's words. It felt as if a heavy weight she'd carried unknowingly was finally lifting. But before the relief could fully settle, Nathaniel leaned in slightly and spoke softly. There's something else. Dana Whitlock, her connection to your past runs deeper than you know. Elaine looked up sharply, confused again. Nathaniel sighed gently. Dana's father was deeply involved with that group. She holds a personal grudge against your family, Elaine. She believes your father betrayed them by leaving the group behind. Elaine's heart pounded painfully. Suddenly, Dana's hostility made sense. It wasn't just workplace rivalry. It was rooted in a past neither of them had chosen, yet both were trapped within. Elaine left the cafe that afternoon with a clarity she'd never felt before. She realized this wasn't just about saving her career or reputation. It was about breaking free from a past of hatred. The sunlight danced through the leaves above her as she walked away, warming her face gently. She knew her journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for once, Elaine felt ready, truly ready to face whatever awaited her, no matter how difficult. And somewhere deep within, she felt certain her mother would be proud. Elaine sat quietly on the old porch swing, sipping her coffee as early morning sunlight crept gently over her small backyard in Atlanta. The familiar scent of fresh grass and the soft chirping of birds did little to soothe the persistent ache she felt deep inside. She glanced at her phone resting nearby, dreading yet another influx of hostile messages and hateful comments that had begun flooding her inbox overnight. Despite the peace surrounding her small neighborhood, Elaine felt anything but peaceful. Her confrontation with Dana at the church event had reignited a firestorm online. Dana had wasted no time twisting the story, painting Elaine as manipulative and insincere, accusing her of exploiting the community to repair her image. The accusations stung deeply, cutting through Elaine's fragile confidence like a blade. As she finished her coffee, the familiar, calming figure of Nathaniel Grant appeared, strolling slowly up the driveway. His reassuring smile instantly lifted Elaine's spirits. I figured you'd be awake, Nathaniel said warmly, climbing the steps and taking a seat beside her. It's hard to sleep when the world feels against you, isn't it? Elaine smiled softly, nodding. I keep wondering if it's all worth it. Maybe people will never believe I've changed. Nathaniel leaned back, looking thoughtfully across the quiet street. People often doubt what they haven't seen clearly, he said gently, but when they finally see your truth, they'll understand your journey. Stay true, Elaine. His words resonated deeply within her. Elaine drew a long breath, letting his calm presence comfort her. After Nathaniel left, Elaine checked her phone again, her heart heavy at seeing another flood of negative comments. She forced herself to scroll through them, stopping abruptly as she noticed a strange message from an unknown account. I know what Dana's doing. I overheard her plans. Call me. Elaine's pulse quickened. She hesitated briefly before dialing the attached number. A hesitant female voice answered. Hello? This is Elaine Wilkins, Elaine said nervously. You messaged me about Dana. There was a pause before the woman spoke again, quieter now, as if afraid someone might hear her. I work with Dana at Aero Atlantic Airlines. She's been deliberately targeting you. It's personal for her. Something about your father and hers. I heard her discussing paying someone to fabricate evidence. Elaine felt her stomach drop. Would you be willing to share this publicly? Silence lingered on the other end. I don't know yet. I'm afraid of losing my job. But I thought you deserved to know. After hanging up, Elaine stared blankly at the quiet street, emotions swirling. Dana's vendetta ran deeper and darker than she had imagined. Elaine knew that exposing this truth would cost dearly, not just for herself, but perhaps for others too. Yet deep inside, something urged her forward. Elaine realized she couldn't let fear stop her now. Her past mistakes demanded honesty, even if it meant confronting painful truths head-on. She stood up, feeling a new resolve take root inside her. It was time to fight, not just for herself, but for everyone caught up in hatred's vicious cycle. Elaine knew she had no choice but to step into the storm once again, hoping her courage would withstand whatever lay ahead. The event at Hope Unity Church had finally arrived, drawing a diverse crowd from all over Atlanta. Elaine, helping volunteers set up tables, felt both excitement and deep apprehension. Nathaniel was busy organizing speakers, while others prepared posters, calling for unity and peace. She caught herself smiling slightly, feeling strangely hopeful despite the looming tension. Just as the community gathering got underway, the atmosphere shifted abruptly. A small but vocal group carrying protest signs pushed through the crowd, their chants filled with hostility. At their center was Dana, eyes cold and determined, clearly orchestrating the chaos. Don't let Elaine Wilkins deceive you, Dana shouted bitterly, stirring unrest among attendees. Her family's legacy is built on hate. Nothing's changed. Elaine's chest tightened painfully, panic surging inside her. She stood frozen momentarily, feeling all eyes turned toward her. Voices rose, confusion and tension rapidly spreading through the crowd. Nathaniel, recognizing Elaine's distress, moved quickly to stand beside her. You can do this, he whispered gently, his voice steadying her trembling nerves. Elaine summoned her courage, stepping forward to address the restless crowd. Her voice, quiet at first, grew clearer as she spoke from her heart. Dana's right. I do have a painful legacy, but I refuse to hide from it. I'm here because hatred destroyed my family, and I won't let it destroy anyone else's. Change begins with honesty, and I'm choosing to be honest. Her words hung quietly in the air, softening the hostility of many in the crowd. Elaine saw confusion in Dana's face as her carefully constructed outrage started unraveling. Several protesters lowered their signs uncertainly, and murmurs of support quietly spread through the gathering. Dana's expression shifted rapidly between anger and uncertainty. Realizing she was losing control, Dana stormed away in frustration, her small group trailing behind her, leaving only awkward silence and relief behind. As the crowd gradually returned to a calm rhythm, Nathaniel squeezed Elaine's shoulder gently, his eyes filled with pride. Your honesty reached their hearts today, Elaine. Elaine felt tears of relief blur her vision slightly as she watched families and neighbors reconnect warmly. Though shaken, the community had withstood the storm together. Elaine knew she'd faced her fears openly, and for that brief moment, felt genuinely hopeful for the first time since everything had begun. Yet as evening settled gently around them, Elaine couldn't shake a lingering unease. Dana's bitterness wasn't finished yet, and Elaine knew this quiet victory was fragile, temporary at best. Though tonight brought comfort, Elaine sensed the hardest battles still lay ahead. Elaine spent the following days alone, quietly reflecting on all that had happened. Though the community event ended positively, a lingering anxiety still shadowed her heart. Sitting alone in her small kitchen, sunlight danced gently across the wooden table, but the peace she desperately craved seemed just beyond reach. Each time she glanced at her phone, worry crept back in, waiting for another crisis to emerge. Feeling restless, Elaine found herself once again climbing the narrow staircase toward the attic. Her footsteps echoed softly as she stepped into the dusty, dimly lit space. Carefully, she began sorting through old boxes, seeking comfort in forgotten memories. Nestled beneath yellowed family photos and faded letters, Elaine discovered a small, worn, leather-bound notebook she'd missed previously. Opening it carefully, she recognized immediately her mother's elegant handwriting. Sylvia had filled these pages with raw honesty, pouring out thoughts she'd never voiced aloud. Elaine's heartbeat quickened as she read. Her mother's quiet voice whispered from the past, revealing how hard she'd fought, secretly, to free her husband from his destructive beliefs. Elaine saw clearly, perhaps for the first time, the bravery hidden beneath her mother's silence. A particular passage made Elaine pause, tears stinging her eyes. If hatred can be learned, perhaps love can be too. Someday I hope Elaine sees that kindness will always outlast bitterness. Those words settled deeply into Elaine's heart. She felt her mother's spirit gently encouraging her forward, reminding her that compassion and courage were her greatest strengths. Closing the diary, Elaine breathed in deeply, the musty scent of old paper strangely comforting her. A knock at the door downstairs broke her reverie. Descending quickly, Elaine opened it to find Nathaniel standing quietly on her porch, his smile warm, reassuring as always. "Thought I'd check on you," he said kindly, noticing her reddened eyes. Elaine invited him in, and they sat together at the kitchen table, sunlight now softening into late afternoon warmth. "I found my mother's diary," Elaine admitted quietly. She believed deeply in forgiveness. Even after everything, she never lost faith. Nathaniel nodded knowingly. "Your mother understood something powerful, Elaine. Forgiveness isn't weak. It's the strongest choice we can make." Elaine looked up at him, her voice steadier now. "I won't run from this anymore. Whatever Dana tries next, I'll face it head on." Nathaniel squeezed her hand gently. "Then you've already won your biggest battle." As Nathaniel left later, Elaine stood on her porch watching the sun dip low over the trees. She felt calm now, stronger somehow, ready to confront whatever came next. Her mother's quiet courage was alive within her, and Elaine knew it would guide her through the storm ahead. Elaine's newfound resolve soon faced its toughest test. A local television station invited her onto their popular talk show, Truth Hour, to openly discuss recent controversies. Though nervous, Elaine accepted immediately, knowing silence was no longer an option. On the evening of the broadcast, Elaine stepped cautiously into the brightly lit studio, cameras pointing directly toward her. Opposite her sat Dana Whitlock, composed yet radiating hostility. The studio audience murmured softly, awaiting the confrontation they anticipated eagerly. The host introduced them, quickly summarizing recent events. Turning to Elaine first, he asked pointedly, "Elaine, why should anyone believe you've truly changed?" Taking a steadying breath, Elaine spoke clearly, honestly, "Because I finally faced who I was and realized who I want to become. My mother taught me that hatred destroys everyone it touches. I won't carry that legacy any further." Dana scoffed bitterly, interrupting sharply. "Convenient speech, Elaine, but words are cheap. Isn't it true your family has always manipulated people's sympathy to escape accountability?" Elaine's heart pounded painfully, anger rising inside her. Yet instead of losing control, she calmly replied, "My family made mistakes, but we learned. I learned. I'm here now because honesty is the only path forward." Dana's frustration grew visibly as her attempts to undermine Elaine faltered. In desperation, Dana revealed bitterly, "Your family destroyed mine. My father never recovered after your family betrayed him." The audience murmured with confusion, sensing Dana's personal vendetta clearly now. Elaine, maintaining composure, responded gently, "Dana, our parents' choices don't have to be ours. Forgiveness frees us both." Dana stood suddenly, hands shaking slightly, eyes shining with angry tears. She stormed off stage, her voice breaking as she muttered, "I won't forgive, ever." A tense silence filled the studio. Finally, the host turned sympathetically back toward Elaine. "Is there hope for people like Dana, do you think?" Elaine nodded softly. "There has to be. Hatred never healed anyone." That night, Elaine walked slowly through quiet streets back to her car, moonlight illuminating her thoughtful expression. Her heart ached for Donna, understanding clearly now how deep wounds from the past could run. Yet beneath the ache, Elaine felt a quiet pride. She'd spoken truth, openly confronting not just Dana's bitterness, but her own fears. She understood now that true strength wasn't about fighting battles, but about offering peace when everything inside urged war. She drove home under a gentle night sky, hopeful yet wary, knowing her journey wasn't over. The hardest steps still lay ahead, but for now Elaine allowed herself a moment of quiet victory, sensing she had crossed an important threshold. Elaine spent the days after the Truth Hour broadcast quietly answering phone calls and responding to supportive emails, surprised by the warmth she was beginning to receive. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel hopeful. Still, she knew Dana's wounds ran deep, and that the fight wasn't truly over yet. On a particularly crisp autumn afternoon, Elaine received a surprising invitation. Pastor Nathaniel had arranged a press conference at Grand Union Hotel, right in the heart of downtown Atlanta, hoping to finally clear Elaine's name publicly. Though anxious, Elaine knew she had to step forward. Silence wasn't an option anymore. As Elaine entered the hotel's elegant conference room, she felt a rush of anxiety tighten her chest. Cameras clicked relentlessly, journalists murmured softly, and bright lights seemed to burn right through her. Nathaniel stood firmly beside her, offering quiet reassurance. Taking the microphone, Elaine began to speak softly, deliberately, addressing each accusation head-on. She openly acknowledged her mistakes, refusing to hide or justify anything. She told the truth clearly, emphasizing her genuine desire to overcome the shadows of her past. Suddenly, the door at the back of the room burst open, interrupting Elaine mid-sentence. Dana entered briskly, a fierce determination flashing across her face as she strode confidently toward the podium. The room buzzed with tension, reporters leaning forward eagerly. "Don't be fooled by this performance," Dana declared loudly, stepping beside Elaine. "Elaine Wilkins is deceiving you all, using sympathy to avoid accountability. Her family has done this before, and she's doing it again." Elaine felt her pulse quicken, but she held herself steady, meeting Dana's intense gaze with calm sincerity. "Dana, I understand your anger, but I'm here because the past doesn't have to define us. Not yours, not mine." Dana's eyes widened briefly, startled by Elaine's quiet compassion, but bitterness quickly resurfaced, masking vulnerability. "You destroyed my family," Dana said, her voice cracking slightly. "You took everything from me." Nathaniel stepped forward gently then, his deep voice soothing the rising tension. "Dana, Elaine did not cause your pain. Neither did her family's decisions. Only hatred and resentment have done that. Forgiveness can set you free." Dana stared at him silently, emotions clearly battling within her. Finally, shaking her head bitterly, she turned and left without another word. Elaine looked back toward the gathered reporters, her voice strong yet gentle. "I want everyone to know, change is possible, forgiveness is real, and no one should live trapped by the mistakes of yesterday." As Elaine finished speaking, applause gently filled the room, surprising and comforting her simultaneously. Nathaniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, smiling warmly. Yet deep in Elaine's heart, uncertainty lingered. Would Dana ever escape the darkness she'd chosen? Could forgiveness truly heal wounds this deep? Leaving the hotel that afternoon, Elaine stepped into the cool breeze, breathing deeply. Though hopeful, she sensed that the real journey, her fight for healing and reconciliation, had only just begun. The next evening, Elaine sat quietly in the brightly lit studio, once again facing cameras and glaring spotlights. Truth Hour had invited her back, this time to reveal critical evidence. Elaine knew tonight was her chance to finally put an end to Dana's relentless campaign against her. Beside her sat Marissa Delgado, a respected attorney from Justice First. Nathaniel stood calmly off camera, his presence a silent source of strength for Elaine. As the broadcast began, Elaine carefully detailed the entire situation. Dana's deliberate manipulation, her paid witnesses, and her attempts to publicly sabotage Elaine's reputation. Elaine's voice was steady, yet compassionate, emphasizing the pain beneath Dana's actions without excusing them. Then Marissa stepped in, presenting undeniable evidence. recorded conversations and text messages exposing Dana's calculated sabotage. The audience listened intently, the room filled with stunned silence. Suddenly, producers signaled the host, announcing Dana herself had unexpectedly called into the show. Elaine's heart jumped anxiously, though she remained composed outwardly. Donna's voice sounded tense, almost desperate. "Elaine, how dare you expose me like this? You've ruined my career." Elaine paused carefully before responding, speaking gently yet firmly. "Dana, you chose this path. Hatred and revenge can never build anything good. It's not too late to stop, to choose healing over pain." Dana's breathing trembled audibly over the line. For a moment, vulnerability pierced her anger. "You don't know how much pain your family caused mine," she whispered hoarsely. "No," Elaine replied softly, "but carrying bitterness won't erase that pain. It will only deepen it. Believe me, I've learned that firsthand." A long silence stretched between them, heavy yet strangely hopeful. Dana finally spoke again, quietly defeated. "Maybe one day, Elaine, but not now." After Dana's call disconnected, the host turned sympathetically toward Elaine. "Where does this leave you both?" Elaine took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "It leaves us both needing to heal, but forgiveness is never impossible, and I'll never stop hoping Dana finds her way there too." After the show, Elaine stepped outside into the fresh evening air, feeling exhausted yet at peace. Nathaniel approached quietly, smiling gently. "You did well tonight, Elaine. Truth always finds a way." Elaine nodded gratefully, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Yet looking up toward the quiet stars overhead, she knew this was merely another step. Dana's anger might fade slowly, if ever, and Elaine still had much to repair. Tonight, however, Elaine allowed herself to believe in possibilities. She knew clearly now that strength wasn't measured in victories, but rather in the willingness to choose compassion, even when everything else urged revenge. The day of the final live debate on Truth Hour arrived quickly. Elaine awoke early, anxiety churning within her stomach. She knew the stakes had never been higher. Despite previous successes, Dana's bitterness persisted, now sharpened by public humiliation. Elaine understood that tonight would determine her future in ways she couldn't yet grasp. The studio felt colder than before. Elaine walked slowly through the crowded halls, noticing how technicians glanced at her sympathetically, silently offering smiles of support. Yet their kindness did little to ease the quiet dread settling inside her chest. Elaine knew facing Dana tonight wouldn't just be a conversation. It would be a battle for her integrity, a test of everything she'd learned about courage and forgiveness. As Elaine settled onto the stage, Dana took her place opposite her, eyes narrowed with determination. Bright studio lights glared down on both of them, intensifying the already palpable tension in the air. The host opened calmly, quickly summarizing recent events before turning toward Dana. "Ms. Whitlock, why have you continued to push these accusations, despite clear evidence against you?" Donna's voice trembled slightly, anger barely concealed. "Because Elaine hasn't changed. She's simply pretending to care now that her reputation's damaged." Elaine remained calm, leaning forward slightly, eyes steady. "Dana, this isn't about reputation. I truly regret my past mistakes, but your actions, lying, manipulating others, have only deepened wounds, not healed them." Dana scoffed bitterly. "And what about the damage your family caused mine? Your father's cowardice destroyed my father's life." Elaine took a slow, deep breath, choosing her words gently. "My father's actions hurt many, including my own family. But we can't change the past, Dana. We can only choose who will become today." Dana faltered slightly, her voice cracking, but quickly regained her composure, eyes flashing angrily. "It's easy for you to say, Elaine. You didn't lose your father the way I lost mine." "I know," Elaine replied quietly, her voice gentle but firm. "But revenge doesn't heal loss, Dana. Trust me, I've seen hatred consume my family, and it nearly consumed me. Letting go of it is the only path forward." Dana's hands trembled slightly. The room was silent as everyone watched intently. For a moment, Dana seemed uncertain, almost vulnerable, but she quickly masked her emotions, turning fiercely toward Elaine. I can never forgive you, she said, voice tight, almost choking. Elaine looked at Dana with compassion rather than anger. Maybe not now, Dana, but someday you might find peace and forgiveness. Until then, hatred will only hurt you more. Donna stood abruptly, eyes bright with unshed tears, and left the stage hurriedly without another word. Elaine watched her go, feeling sadness rather than victory. After the debate, as Elaine stepped outside the studio into the quiet Atlanta night, Nathaniel approached silently. You showed grace tonight, he said softly. Elaine nodded quietly, exhaustion etched into her features. I just hope Dana can find peace somehow. I know how heavy bitterness can be. Nathaniel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, his voice warm. You've opened the door to healing, Elaine. Now it's up to Dana whether she walks through it. Elaine sighed softly, looking up at the dark sky above. Though tonight's battle was finished, she knew the road ahead remained uncertain, with Dana's anger still burning unresolved. Yet standing beneath the silent stars, Elaine felt at peace with herself. Regardless of what came next, she'd found something far greater than victory. She'd found the courage to confront hate openly, even when forgiveness seemed impossible. After the intensity of the debate, Elaine returned home, exhaustion pressing heavily on her. She sat quietly in her small living room, surrounded by framed photos of better days. The clock on the wall ticked softly, breaking the quiet of the house. Elaine felt drained, yet oddly hopeful. The worst storms had passed and she'd survived, but she knew her journey toward true reconciliation was far from over. A gentle knock at the front door startled her from her thoughts. Elaine rose slowly, opening it cautiously. Pastor Nathaniel stood there, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. I thought you might appreciate these, Nathaniel said softly, handing the flowers over with a warm smile. Elaine felt a wave of gratitude inviting him in. Sitting comfortably across from each other, Nathaniel's eyes filled with quiet pride. You changed hearts today, Elaine. Not just minds, but hearts. That's powerful. Elaine smiled faintly, her eyes drifting toward a photograph of her mother on the mantel. I never thought I'd be brave enough to confront all this publicly. My mother would be proud, wouldn't she? Nathaniel nodded thoughtfully. She'd be incredibly proud. You've transformed your family's legacy into something meaningful. Elaine sighed deeply, looking down at the flowers in her lap. Do you think Dana will ever forgive me? Nathaniel's expression softened, eyes thoughtful. Dana is on her own journey now. Forgiveness is a choice everyone must make for themselves. You've done your part. Now give her space to find her way. Elaine nodded slowly, understanding the gentle wisdom in his words. They sat quietly together, the comfortable silence soothing her tired heart. As Nathaniel left, Elaine moved quietly to the window, gazing out into the soft evening twilight. Her thoughts drifted toward Dana, feeling a surprising sense of sympathy rather than anger. She knew firsthand how heavy resentment could become when carried too long. Taking a deep breath, Elaine reached for her mother's diary on the table beside her. She gently flipped through the familiar pages, her mother's quiet wisdom comforting her once more. One line stood out clearly now, resonating deeply in Elaine's heart. Forgiveness isn't forgetting the past. It's freeing yourself from its weight. Elaine closed the diary slowly, feeling peace settle around her, gentle but sure. She realized that her mother had given her the most precious gift, a roadmap toward forgiveness. Elaine knew now her path clearly, no matter how difficult it might become. Outside, twilight settled gently over the neighborhood, painting the sky in muted hues of purple and gold. Elaine stood quietly by the window, flowers still cradled gently in her hands. Tonight she felt a new chapter beginning, one filled with hope, reconciliation, and purpose. The days following the televised debate brought a quiet stillness to Elaine's life she hadn't experienced in weeks. Supportive messages poured in steadily, offering comfort and encouragement, helping ease the lingering anxiety she'd carried. Yet Elaine knew the battle was far from over. Dana's bitterness hadn't disappeared overnight, and Elaine felt certain another storm was brewing. One morning, Elaine received an unexpected invitation, a request to speak at a major rally downtown, organized by Nathaniel and community leaders. They wanted Elaine to share her story openly, inspiring others toward unity and reconciliation. Though the thought terrified her, Elaine agreed without hesitation. As she stood backstage later that evening, the rumble of the gathered crowd outside filled her with nervous excitement. Taking a deep breath, Elaine stepped onto the stage, greeted by a wave of applause that echoed warmly throughout the plaza. She felt vulnerable, standing exposed before hundreds of faces, looking expectantly at her. As Elaine began to speak, her voice started softly, uncertainly, but soon gained strength, becoming clear and steady. She openly admitted her past ignorance, her prejudices, and her painful journey toward understanding. The crowd listened intently, feeling deeply connected to her honesty. Then suddenly a familiar face appeared at the back of the audience. Dana Whitlock, eyes shadowed, arms folded defensively. Elaine's voice faltered momentarily, her pulse quickening. But instead of avoiding Dana's eyes, Elaine addressed her gently, publicly. Dana, I can't undo the past, but I can promise you this. I won't stop working until prejudice loses its power, until bitterness is replaced by understanding. Forgiveness changed my heart. It can change yours too. The crowd watched silently, turning toward Dana, whose expression wavered uncertainly. Elaine saw Dana's eyes glisten momentarily before she abruptly turned and left, disappearing into the crowd. Afterward, Nathaniel approached Elaine warmly. Your courage has touched many hearts today, Elaine, he said quietly. She smiled softly, grateful for his reassuring presence. Yet deep within, Elaine still felt uneasy. Had her words reached Dana, or merely pushed her further away? Though the crowd around her applauded warmly, Elaine understood that true healing couldn't be rushed. She quietly hoped Dana would find her own path toward peace, even if it wasn't today. As the rally dispersed and people returned home, Elaine lingered briefly, watching the emptying square. She felt a sense of accomplishment tinged with caution. Her journey was far from complete, but she'd taken another meaningful step forward. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight Elaine found comfort knowing she'd spoken her truth openly, bravely, perhaps finally breaking the cycle of silence she'd lived within for far too long. Weeks passed quickly, filled with new challenges and small victories for Elaine. She poured herself into building the Sylvia Wilkins Foundation, determined to turn past pain into a meaningful legacy. But even amid this progress, a part of her heart still worried about Dana, wondering whether forgiveness would ever reach her former rival. Then one afternoon, Elaine received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Dana, her voice quiet, hesitant, stripped of the bitterness Elaine had grown accustomed to. Elaine, Dana began uncertainly, can we talk? Elaine agreed immediately, meeting Dana later that evening at a quiet park near the edge of Atlanta. They sat cautiously on a wooden bench beneath gently rustling leaves, an awkward silence lingering between them. Finally, Dana spoke quietly, her voice trembling. I've spent weeks blaming you for everything that's gone wrong in my life. But honestly, I'm tired. Carrying around all this anger is exhausting. Elaine listened patiently, sensing Dana's struggle. I know exactly how heavy that anger feels. Letting go isn't easy. I still battle it myself. Dana nodded slowly, eyes lowered in shame. I was afraid admitting I was wrong would make me weak. Now I'm beginning to see it might be the strongest thing I could do. Elaine reached out gently, placing a hand lightly on Dana's arm. It is, Dana. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the strongest choice we can make. Dana sighed deeply, her eyes moistening. How do I even start? Elaine smiled softly, understanding Dana's question intimately. You just did. The two women sat quietly together in the fading daylight, finally feeling some small measure of peace. Elaine knew Dana's path forward wouldn't be easy, but she also knew forgiveness had begun. As evening deepened, Dana quietly stood, giving Elaine a small, hesitant smile. Thank you for not giving up on me. Elaine watched Dana walk away slowly, shoulders lighter than she'd ever seen. Elaine remained on the bench, the peaceful twilight washing gently over her. In this quiet moment, Elaine understood fully that forgiveness had truly set both of them free. She sat silently, listening to crickets singing softly in the gathering darkness, knowing at last the cycle of bitterness had ended. Elaine felt a profound sense of hopefulness fill her heart, reassuring her that no matter how dark the past, it never held the power to overshadow the future, so long as someone was brave enough to step into the light. Elaine stood quietly by the window in her office at the Sylvia Wilkins Foundation, watching golden autumn leaves drift gently down onto the small garden below. Life had gradually settled into a new rhythm, one marked by purpose and quiet satisfaction. Yet even in the comforting routine of daily tasks and community gatherings, Elaine often found herself wondering about Dana. Though they'd reached a fragile peace, she sensed Dana was still burdened by unresolved guilt. One evening, just as Elaine prepared to lock up and leave, a soft knock at the front door startled her. Curious, she opened it to find Dana standing hesitantly on the doorstep, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. Her eyes were red, her face pale with exhaustion. "Dana?" Elaine asked gently, motioning her inside. "Are you all right?" Dana nodded silently, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. "I need to talk to you, Elaine. I've been thinking a lot. About everything." They sat together in the quiet comfort of Elaine's office, the soft hum of evening traffic filtering through the window. Dana took a deep breath, placing the flowers nervously on the table. "I came here because I realized how wrong I've been. All these months I blamed you for my pain, but it was never you," Dana admitted quietly, eyes filling with tears. "It was easier to be angry at someone else than face the truth about my family." Elaine listened silently, her heart softening at Dana's raw honesty. She knew well how difficult it was to confront past wounds openly. Dana continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "When you talked about forgiveness that night, I pretended not to hear you. But your words stuck with me. I've been carrying anger for so long, and it nearly destroyed me." Elaine reached out, taking Dana's trembling hands gently in hers. "I understand, Dana. That anger nearly destroyed me too. But choosing forgiveness, it changed everything." Dana nodded softly, tears sliding quietly down her face. "Can you ever forgive me, Elaine? For everything I've done?" Elaine looked deeply into Dana's eyes, seeing genuine pain mixed with hopeful sincerity. "Dana, I forgave you long ago, but true forgiveness begins when you forgive yourself." Dana took a shaky breath, relief slowly brightening her eyes. They sat quietly, tears softly falling, washing away months, perhaps years, of bitterness. For the first time, Elaine saw genuine peace in Dana's expression, a cautious hopefulness breaking through past resentment. As Dana stood to leave, she paused briefly, turning toward Elaine once more. "I'd like to help you here at the foundation, if you'd allow it. Maybe it's my way of finally making things right." Elaine smiled warmly, nodding without hesitation. "I'd be honored." Dana left quietly, walking out into the cool autumn evening, seeming lighter than she'd been in years. Watching her go, Elaine felt profoundly moved, realizing that their journey toward reconciliation had truly begun. It would be slow and complicated, but healing had finally started. Elaine returned to her desk, the bouquet Dana brought still fresh beside her, filling the room with gentle fragrance. She sat quietly, heart heavy yet full, realizing that true forgiveness wasn't simply about letting go of bitterness, it was about opening doors once sealed tightly by pain. As the sky deepened into twilight, Elaine felt a serene clarity settle over her. She knew the wounds of the past weren't gone completely, but now hope had begun quietly blooming, transforming shadows of hatred into gentle pathways forward. Tonight, Elaine finally understood the full meaning of her mother's words. Forgiveness frees us all. A year later, the large banquet hall at Atlanta's downtown convention center buzzed with quiet excitement. Guests streamed in steadily, warmly greeting each other beneath elegant banners reading, "Sylvia Wilkins Foundation, One Community, One Heart." Elaine stood at the edge of the stage, heart beating fast as she watched the gathering crowd. Though public speaking had become familiar, tonight felt special, a celebration marking genuine, lasting change. Nathaniel approached, his reassuring smile easing her nerves. "Ready?" he asked gently, sensing her quiet apprehension. Elaine took a deep breath, smiling back. "I think so, but my mother would have loved to see this." Nathaniel nodded softly, eyes thoughtful. She sees it, Elaine. Every moment of it. The lights dimmed slightly as Nathaniel stepped onto the stage, introducing Elaine warmly. As she approached the podium, applause erupted, heartfelt and enthusiastic. Elaine stood quietly for a moment, gazing at faces now familiar. Faces of former strangers, former rivals, now united by shared purpose. She spoke clearly, her voice steady yet filled with emotion, recounting her journey openly. Elaine described how she'd confronted her family's legacy, acknowledging painful mistakes, and how forgiveness transformed her heart. The audience listened intently, deeply moved by her honesty. Forgiveness is never easy, Elaine concluded gently, but it's the strongest act of courage we have. My mother taught me that. Today, standing here with all of you, I finally understand what she meant. The hall filled with applause once again, and Elaine stepped back, feeling deeply grateful. But before she left the stage, Dana approached, smiling shyly, holding a small plaque. I'd like to say something, Dana began hesitantly. Elaine taught me something I'll never forget. That hatred and anger only trap us. Elaine, thank you for forgiving me and for teaching me how to forgive myself. Dana handed Elaine the plaque inscribed simply, for courage, compassion, and forgiveness. Tears filled Elaine's eyes as she hugged Dana warmly, applause growing louder around them. Nathaniel stepped forward, eyes moist with pride, gently addressing the audience, reminding them that unity and healing were always possible through honesty and compassion. Later that evening, as guests slowly dispersed, Elaine stood quietly by a window, gazing at Atlanta's glittering skyline, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. Nathaniel approached softly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You did something incredible tonight, he said warmly. Elaine smiled softly, eyes reflecting quiet satisfaction. It wasn't just me. We all did. Nathaniel nodded thoughtfully. Your mother's legacy lives on, brighter than ever. Outside, gentle stars began emerging across the darkening sky. Elaine felt peaceful, knowing the journey toward healing was never fully finished. Yet tonight, surrounded by love, compassion, and reconciliation, she finally felt whole. As Nathaniel left, Elaine's phone vibrated gently. She glanced down, seeing a message from Dana. Someone anonymous just donated enough funds to expand nationwide. Message says, thanks for teaching me the power of forgiveness. See you soon. Dana Elaine smiled warmly, heart swelling with hope. Gazing upward once more, she whispered softly, thank you, Mom. Standing there quietly beneath the soft glow of the Atlanta night, Elaine understood clearly now. Her journey had never truly been about overcoming storms of hatred. It had always been about finding strength within herself to choose forgiveness, healing, and unity, even amid the darkest times. And tonight, Elaine finally knew she was exactly where she belonged, on the path toward a brighter, kinder future, guided gently by forgiveness, compassion, and hope. At the heart of this story lies a powerful truth. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past. It's about freeing ourselves from its weight. Elaine Wilkins faced judgment, hatred, and even her own fears. But by choosing understanding over resentment, she didn't just change her own life. She changed the lives of those around her. Because real strength isn't found in revenge, but in the courage to heal, to grow, and to let go. Pause. What do you think? Can people truly change, or do their past mistakes define them forever? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Pause. And if you found this story as powerful as we did, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because trust me, you won't want to miss the next one.